The rain had stopped by the time I pulled into the parking lot, but the sky remained the color of wet concrete. I sat in my car for a moment, watching water drip from the oak branches above, forming small rivers across the windshield. The funeral home looked exactly as Kristina had described it on the phone 3 days ago: modern, tasteful, expensive. Nothing like the small chapel where James and I had been married 43 years ago. I should have known something was wrong when she called me Dorothy instead of Mom. We'd never been close, but in 15 years of marriage to my son Michael, she'd at least pretended. That afternoon her voice had been professionally sympathetic, the kind you'd use with a client. Dorothy, I've taken care of all the arrangements. You shouldn't have to worry about a thing during this difficult time. She'd sent me the address, the time, and hung up before I could ask about the details. What flowers had she chosen? What music? Had she found the letter James kept in his desk drawer, the one explaining what he wanted? But I didn't call back. I told myself she was trying to be helpful, that grief made everyone act strangely. I told myself a lot of things that week. The service was scheduled to start in 20 minutes. Through the windows, I could see people already gathering inside, dark shapes moving through the soft lighting. I recognized some of them James's colleagues from the consulting firm he'd built from nothing, neighbors from our street, my sister Claire who'd driven up from Eugene. But I didn't move. Instead, I watched my hands on the steering wheel, noticing how the autumn light made the gold of my wedding band look almost bronze. James had been dead for 6 days. Heart attack in his office, sudden and complete. No warning, no goodbye, no chance to tell him that the leftover lasagna in the fridge was his favorite, and I'd made it just that morning thinking we'd have it for dinner. No chance to say any of the thousands of small things that make up a marriage. My phone buzzed. A text from Michael. "Mom, where are you? It's about to start." I took a breath, checked my reflection in the rearview mirror. My grey hair neat, my black dress appropriate, my face composed, and got out of the car. The air smelled like wet leaves and someone's cigarette smoke drifting from around the corner. As I walked toward the entrance, I passed a sandwich board sign on an easel. Celebrating the life of James Robert Whitmore. Celebrating. I wondered if James would have found that funny or offensive. Michael met me at the door. He looked exhausted, his eyes red-rimmed, his suit slightly rumpled as if he'd slept in it. When he hugged me, I felt him trembling. "Mom," he whispered against my shoulder. I'm so sorry. I held him for a moment. This man who still sometimes seemed like the little boy who'd once brought me dandelions from the yard, calling them flowers. "It's all right," I said, though I wasn't sure what he was apologizing for. "We'll get through this." He pulled back, and I saw something flicker across his face. Guilt, maybe, or fear. But before I could ask, Kristina appeared beside us, her hand on Michael's arm. She looked perfect. Her black sheath dress was designer, her blonde hair twisted into an elegant knot, her makeup flawless despite what I assumed were tears she'd shed. She gave me a tight smile. "Dorothy, I'm so glad you made it. We were worried you might not feel up to attending." She gestured toward the interior of the funeral home. "I've arranged everything according to what I thought James would have wanted. Modern, forward-thinking. A celebration rather than a mourning." "Thank you," I managed. What else could I say? She led us inside, her heels clicking on the polished floor. The main room was decorated with white orchids, not James's favorite. He'd always preferred the wild roses I grew in our garden, and instrumental music played softly from hidden speakers. On a table near the entrance sat programs printed on heavy cream cardstock. I picked one up. The cover showed a photo of James from last year, smiling at some company event. Inside, I found the Order of Service, a poem I didn't recognize, and a short biography. I read the biography while Kristina greeted arriving guests. James Robert Whitmore built Whitmore Consulting from the ground up, establishing it as one of the Pacific Northwest's premier technology strategy firms. A visionary leader and mentor to many, he leaves behind a legacy of innovation and excellence. He is survived by his son Michael and daughter-in-law Kristina, who will continue his work. That's all it said. 43 years of marriage. And I was a footnote. Not even that I was simply absent. Erased as if I'd never been there at all. Claire found me standing there, staring at the program. She took it from my hands, read it, and her face went white with anger. "This is... not now," I said quietly. The room was filling up. People were watching. The service began. Kristina had arranged for a slideshow to play on a large screen at the front of the room. I sat in the front row between Michael and Claire, watching images of James's life flash by. James at his college graduation. James shaking hands with clients. James at the company's 20th anniversary party. James on a golf course with his business partners. James and Michael at some restaurant, both holding up champagne glasses. There were 47 photos in that slideshow. I counted them. I appeared in exactly 3, and in each one, I was so far in the background you could barely make out my face. The years we'd spent building his business together, back when we ran it from our dining room table, gone. The trips we'd taken, the holidays, the quiet Sunday mornings reading the paper together, none of it. It was as if our marriage had been incidental, a minor detail in the story of James Robert Whitmore, visionary businessman. When Kristina stood up to give the eulogy, I felt Claire's hand grip mine. Kristina spoke about James's accomplishments, his drive, his dedication to the company. He always said the business was his legacy, she told the room, her voice carrying easily, his gift to the next generation. Everything he built was for the future, for Michael and for the foundation we'll establish in his name. She paused, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. James believed in planning ahead, in making sure his life's work would continue long after he was gone. That's the kind of man he was always thinking about tomorrow. She didn't mention that James had taught me to use our first computer, patiently showing me spreadsheets and databases when I was terrified of breaking something. She didn't mention the nights he'd stayed up late helping me prepare for my library science exams, or the way he'd always called me first when something good happened at work. She didn't mention that when I'd retired from the Portland Public Library system 5 years ago, he'd told me it was the happiest day of his life because now we'd have more time together. After the service, there was a reception. Caterers circulated with trays of wine and small, tasteful hors d'oeuvre. Kristina held court near the refreshment table, accepting condolences with practiced grace. I watched people approach her, watched her place her hand over her heart, watched her mouth thank you with perfect sincerity. Mrs. Whitmore? A woman I didn't recognize appeared at my elbow. She was perhaps 50, wearing a grey suit. I worked with your husband for 10 years. He was an incredible mentor. I'm so sorry for your loss. Thank you, I said. She hesitated. I have to say, though, I'm surprised by some of this. She gestured vaguely at the room. James talked about you all the time. He had that photo of the two of you on his desk, the one from your anniversary trip to the coast. He was always showing people that picture, talking about how you could identify any wildflower just by looking at it. I felt something catch in my throat. He kept that photo on his desk, right in the center. He said it was his favorite, you laughing at something, holding a bunch of beach grass like a bouquet. She smiled sadly. I just thought you should know. He loved you very much. After she left, I went looking for the restroom. I needed a moment alone, away from the well-meaning condolences and Kristina's careful orchestration. The bathroom was down a corridor, past several smaller viewing rooms. As I walked back, I heard voices from one of the rooms, Kristina and someone else. All set for Friday, Kristina was saying. Robert's office at 2 o'clock. The will reading should be straightforward. Are you sure? A man's voice, not Michael. What if she... She won't. Dorothy's not the type to make waves. She'll accept whatever's in the will and go quietly. Trust me. I've watched her for 15 years. She won't even ask questions. And Michael? Michael will do what I tell him to do. He always does. I stood frozen in the corridor, my heart pounding. I should have announced myself, should have walked in and confronted them. Instead, I turned and went back to the reception, my mind racing. Robert Chen was James's attorney, his college roommate, someone we'd had over for dinner dozens of times. The will reading was in 3 days. What did Kristina mean? Straightforward. James and I had made our wills together 5 years ago, sitting at Robert's office while he explained everything carefully. Everything split evenly, with provisions for Michael, of course, but primarily leaving our estate to each other, unless James had changed it. Unless something had happened that I didn't know about. I found Michael standing alone near the windows, staring out at the parking lot. When I touched his shoulder, he jumped. Mom. Hi. Are you okay? Do you need anything? I need you to tell me the truth, I said quietly. What's going on with the will? His face went pale. What do you mean? Michael, you're my son. I've known you your entire life. I can tell when you're hiding something. I kept my voice gentle. Whatever it is, please just tell me. He looked around, making sure no one was nearby, then leaned in close. Dad changed the will. About 6 months ago. Kristina said he wanted to make sure the business was protected, that it would pass to the family properly. She said you agreed to it. I agreed to nothing. I didn't even know he changed it. But she said he stopped. Realization dawning in his eyes. Oh God, what does the new will say? I don't know the details. Kristina handled everything. She said Dad wanted her to manage the estate transition because you'd be too overwhelmed with grief, and I believed her. I believed. His voice cracked. Mom, I'm so sorry. I should have talked to you directly. I should have questioned it. It's all right, I said, though it wasn't. We'll figure this out together. But he shook his head. You don't understand. Kristina's a lawyer. She clerked for a federal judge before she went into marketing. She knows how to make things look legitimate. And Dad, he trusted her. We all did. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in the bed I'd shared with James for 4 decades, staring at the ceiling and trying to make sense of everything. The house felt too big and too empty. Every shadow seemed to hide another question. At 2 in the morning, I got up and went to James's study. I'd been avoiding it since his death, unable to face the room where he'd spent so many evenings working. Now I turned on the light and looked around. Everything was as he'd left it, papers stacked on the desk, books on the shelves, his reading glasses folded on top of a legal pad. On the wall hung the framed blueprints from our first office, drawn on graph paper at our kitchen table. But the photo the woman had mentioned, the one from our anniversary trip, it wasn't there. I checked the entire desk, the drawers, the shelves. Someone had removed it. I sat down in James's chair and opened his desk drawers systematically. Most contained the usual items: pens, notepads, old business cards, but the bottom right drawer was locked. I'd never known James to lock anything in this house. We didn't have secrets, or so I'd thought. I searched for the key, checking the desk, the bookshelf, even the ceramic bowl where he kept spare change. Nothing. Finally, I checked behind the framed blueprints, and there it was, a small brass key taped to the back of the frame. The drawer opened easily. Inside, I found a manila folder labeled "Dorothy, open if anything happens to me." My hands shook as I pulled it out. Inside were several documents. A handwritten letter in James's careful script, photocopies of what appeared to be legal documents, bank statements, and printouts of emails. I read the letter first. My dearest Dot, if you're reading this, I'm gone, and I'm sorry I had to write this letter instead of telling you in person. But I wanted to make sure you had proof, in case anyone questioned what I'm about to tell you. About 8 months ago, Kristina came to me with a proposal. She said she'd been reviewing the business finances and believed we needed to restructure the company for tax purposes. She had papers drawn up, legal documents that seemed legitimate. I signed some of them because she said it was standard business procedure. It wasn't until 3 months ago that I realized what I'd actually signed. Kristina had transferred significant portions of the business assets into a family trust, but a trust controlled by her and Michael, not by you and me. When I confronted her, she said it was for Michael's benefit, for the future. She said you'd agreed to it. When I told her I'd never discussed it with you, she became angry. She said I was old-fashioned and didn't understand modern estate planning. I went to Robert immediately. We've been quietly working to undo what Kristina did, but it's complicated. The documents she had me sign were legally binding, even if obtained under false pretenses. Robert advised me to create a new will with very specific language and to document everything in case there was a challenge. The new will is in Robert's possession. It invalidates the trust Kristina created and ensures that you retain control of our estate, including the business. Kristina doesn't know this. I never told her or Michael that I'd discovered the problem and fixed it. I'm telling you this because Kristina will likely try to claim that I wanted her and Michael to inherit everything. She'll probably say I was planning to leave you provided for, but remove you from business decisions. Don't believe her. Everything we built together. Every decision I made with you in mind. You are not an afterthought in my life. You are the foundation of it. If she challenges the will, Robert has all the documentation we need. The emails proving she misrepresented things to me. The bank records showing suspicious transfers. Everything. I'm sorry I didn't tell you about this sooner. I didn't want to worry you, and I kept hoping I could resolve it quietly. But if you're reading this, then I ran out of time. I love you. I have loved you since the day you walked into that library 45 years ago and told me I was late returning The Great Gatsby. I will love you beyond whatever comes next. Always, James. I read it 3 times, tears streaming down my face. Then I looked at the other documents. Email after email where Kristina pressured James, suggested updating various legal arrangements, pushed for modern estate planning solutions. Bank statements showing transfers to accounts I'd never heard of. And finally, a copy of the new will James had created with Robert, clearly dated and notarized, explicitly stating that it superseded all previous documents and trusts. I gathered everything carefully, put it back in the folder, and sat in the dark study until sunrise. The next 3 days passed in a blur. Kristina called twice to check on me, her voice syrupy with false concern. Michael came by once, bringing casseroles from church members, but Kristina was with him and did most of the talking. Claire stayed at my house, sleeping in the guest room, and I was grateful for her presence, even though I didn't tell her what I'd found. Not yet. Friday afternoon arrived cold and grey, with rain threatening. Claire offered to come with me to Robert's office, but I told her I'd be fine. I wanted to face this alone, to see Kristina's face when she realized what James had done. Robert Chen's office was downtown, in one of the older buildings with high ceilings and wood paneling. I'd always liked it here. It felt solid, trustworthy. The receptionist greeted me with genuine sympathy and showed me to the conference room. I was the first to arrive. Robert appeared a moment later, carrying a leather portfolio. He was a small man, barely 5'6", with silver hair and sharp dark eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. When he saw me, relief flooded his face. "Dorothy, thank God. I wasn't sure if Kristina would even tell you about today." "She didn't. Michael did." He nodded slowly. "Did you find James's letter?" "Last Tuesday night. I have the folder with me." "Good. You're going to need it." He sat down across from me, his expression grave. "Dorothy, I need to prepare you for what's about to happen. Kristina's going to act shocked and betrayed. She'll probably claim James was manipulated, or that I influenced him improperly. She might even threaten legal action. But everything James did, he did clearly and with full understanding. I have his signed statements, video testimony, everything we need." "Video testimony?" "James recorded a message 3 months ago, after he discovered what Kristina had done. He wanted there to be no doubt about his intentions." Robert paused. "It's not an easy video to watch. He was angry and hurt, but it's also very clear about what he wanted." Before I could respond, the door opened. Kristina entered first, Michael trailing behind her. She dressed for the occasion in a charcoal grey suit, her hair pulled back, reading glasses perched on her nose, like she'd just been reviewing important documents. Professional, competent, in control. "Robert, Dorothy." She nodded at us both, her smile cool. "Shall we get started? I'm sure this won't take long." Michael gave me an anguished look as he sat down. I reached over and squeezed his hand briefly, trying to tell him without words that it would be all right. Robert opened his portfolio and pulled out several documents. "Before we begin, I need to address something. Kristina, approximately 8 months ago, you prepared documents transferring assets from James's business into a family trust. Do you recall this?" "Of course. Standard estate planning. James wanted to protect the business." "Did James tell you he was creating those documents?" "He signed them. That's what matters legally." "Actually," Robert said quietly, "what matters legally is whether he understood what he was signing and whether he signed voluntarily. James came to see me 3 months ago with concerns about those transfers." Kristina's smile didn't waver. James was getting older. Sometimes he second-guessed himself. He was 68 years old and in full possession of his faculties. I have a medical evaluation from his doctor confirming this. Robert pulled out another document. James executed a new will on August 15th of this year. This will explicitly revokes all previous wills and any trusts created through transfers he did not specifically approve in writing. "That's impossible," Kristina said, but I noticed her hand had clenched around her pen. "I reviewed his estate planning regularly. He would have told me if he changed anything. He didn't tell you because he'd realized you weren't acting in his best interests or Dorothy's." Robert looked at me. "The will is very clear. The estate, including the business, passes entirely to Dorothy. There are provisions for Michael in a separate trust that Kristina cannot access or control. The family trust Kristina created is invalidated. The silence in the room was absolute. Then Kristina laughed a sharp, brittle sound. You can't be serious. James built that company for Michael. For our family. He wouldn't cut us out. He didn't cut Michael out. He cut you out. Robert's voice remained calm. And before you claim that James was manipulated or incompetent, I should show you something he prepared for this exact situation. He pulled out a laptop, opened it, and turned it so we could all see the screen. He pressed play on a video file. James appeared on the screen, sitting in what looked like Robert's office. The timestamp showed August 15th, 3 months before his death. He looked directly into the camera, his expression serious and sad. My name is James Robert Whitmore. Today is August 15th. I'm here with my attorney, Robert Chen, to make my final wishes absolutely clear because I've learned that someone I trusted has been working against my family's interests. Kristina, if you're watching this, I want you to know that I know what you did. I know you manipulated me into signing documents, transferring business assets into a trust you control. I know you told me Dorothy had agreed to these arrangements when she knew nothing about them. I know you've been planning to isolate Dorothy from the business and the wealth we built together. I'm fixing it now. Everything reverts to Dorothy, as it should have been all along. Every decision I've made in 43 years of marriage, I've made with her. She's not a bystander in my life. She's not someone who needs to be provided for like a dependent. She's my partner, and she will control our estate. Michael, son, I love you. But you need to understand that Kristina has not been honest with you or with me. I hope you'll support your mother in this. If you can't, I'm sorry, but I won't leave everything I built in the hands of someone who sees it only as money to be controlled. James paused, and I saw him blink back tears. When he spoke again, his voice was softer. I'm sorry I let this happen. I should have protected us better. But I'm fixing it now, and Robert will make sure my wishes are honored. I love you. Build something good with what we made together. The video ended. In the silence that followed, I could hear the clock on the wall ticking, the sound of traffic outside, my own heartbeat. Kristina stood abruptly. This is elder abuse. Robert, you manipulated a sick old man. James wasn't sick, I said, surprising myself with how steady my voice sounded. And calling him a sick old man is exactly the problem, isn't it? You saw him as someone to manage, to control, not as a person. I tried to help this family. You tried to steal from this family. I stood too, facing her across the table. You erased me from my husband's funeral. You created documents without my knowledge. You lied to my son and to my husband. And you did it all while smiling and pretending to care. Her mask slipped then. The professional competence vanished, replaced by something cold and calculating. You have no idea how to run that business. You're a retired librarian. What are you going to do? Organize the files by the Dewey Decimal System. I helped James build that company from nothing. I did the books for the first 10 years. I know every client, every contract, every risk we took. What I don't know is how to betray someone's trust. I picked up the folder I'd brought. I have James's letter. I have the emails you sent him. I have documentation of every lie you told. So if you want to fight this in court, please do. I'd love to explain to a judge exactly what you did. Michael spoke for the first time, his voice barely above a whisper. Kristina, is it true? All of it? She turned to him, and I watched her try to find the right words, the right expression. But whatever she saw in his face must have told her it was too late. Michael, I did what I thought was best for us. For our future. You lied to my father. You lied to me. He stood up slowly. You made me complicit in stealing from my own mother. I was protecting you. Get out. Michael. Get out. His voice broke. Just get out. Kristina looked at Robert, at me, then back at Michael. Something flickered across her face. Anger, maybe, or fear. Then she grabbed her bag and left, her heels sharp on the floor. After she was gone, Michael buried his face in his hands. Mom, I'm so sorry. I should have known. I should have protected you. I went to him, wrapped my arms around this man who was still somehow my little boy. You didn't know. She was very good at what she did. But I should have questioned it. When she started handling things, when Dad seemed worried, I should have asked more questions. You're asking them now. That's what matters. Robert cleared his throat gently. Dorothy, we should finish reviewing the will. There are some other provisions James made that you should know about. We sat back down, and Robert walked me through everything. The business, valued at approximately $58 million, was now mine to run or sell as I saw fit. There was a separate trust for Michael, but it was structured so that he couldn't access it fully until he turned 50 or divorced Kristina, whichever came first. James had even left instructions for the business, suggestions for what might be done with it. He also, Robert said, pulling out one final document, made a provision for a foundation. He wanted to fund a scholarship program for adult learners returning to education. He asked that you run it, if you were willing. He said you'd understand why. I did understand. When I'd gone back to school in my 30s to get my library degree, James had supported me completely. He'd been so proud when I graduated, told everyone that watching me walk across that stage was one of the best moments of his life. There's one more thing, Robert said. James left you a personal letter. Not the legal one explaining everything, a different one. He gave it to me the day he made the video and asked me to give it to you after the will reading. He handed me an envelope. My name was written on it in James's handwriting, just dot with a small heart after it. I didn't open it there. I thanked Robert, hugged Michael, and drove home in the gathering darkness. Claire was waiting with tea and sympathy, but I asked for a few minutes alone. I went to the study, turned on the small lamp on James's desk, and opened the letter. My dearest Dot, if Robert's giving you this, it means everything went according to plan and you've seen the video. I'm sorry I had to do things this way. I'm sorry you had to find out about Kristina's betrayal and my own stupidity in trusting her. But I want you to know something important. This isn't just about the money or the business. It's about making sure you're not erased. That's what Kristina was trying to do, erase you from the story of our life together. Make it seem like the business was mine alone, like you were just someone who happened to be there. But you weren't just there. You were the reason I built anything worth building. Every success I had, you celebrated with me. Every failure you helped me learn from. When I wanted to give up, you reminded me why we'd started. When I got too focused on money, you reminded me what actually mattered. I know the funeral was probably hard. Kristina insisted on planning it, and I'm sure she made it about the business and the legacy and all the things that sound impressive. But what I want you to remember is this. The legacy isn't the company. It's the life we built together. It's the flowers you pressed from every vacation we took. The books we read aloud to each other. The Sunday mornings when we didn't get out of bed until noon. It's the way you laugh at my terrible jokes and the way you forgive me when I'm being stubborn. That's what I'm leaving you, not just money, but permission to write your own story now. Build something good. Help people the way you always have. Live fully and completely, and know that every moment I'm proud of you. Also, there's something hidden in your flower press. Check between the last pages. It's something I've been meaning to give you for 43 years. All my love. Always. James. I went to the bookshelf where I kept my flower press. A large, heavy book where I preserved flowers from our travels. I'd been adding to it since our honeymoon. I opened it to the back pages and found an envelope tucked inside. Inside was a dried dandelion, carefully preserved, and a small note in faded ink. The first flower I ever gave you. I told you it was a real flower, and you said all flowers are real. That's when I knew I was going to marry you, Jay. I sat there in James's study, holding that dandelion and crying not from grief, though there was plenty of that, but from something else too. Gratitude, maybe. Or love. Or the fierce satisfaction of knowing that despite everything, despite Kristina's best efforts, our story was still ours. The next few weeks were complicated. Kristina filed for divorce from Michael, which no one was surprised about. She tried to contest the will, but her lawyer took one look at the documentation and advised her to settle. In the end, she signed a non-disclosure agreement and accepted a small payment to go away quietly. Michael moved back home for a while, working through his guilt and grief. We had long conversations about trust and manipulation and how good people sometimes make terrible mistakes. I thought about what to do with the business. Several of James's partners offered to buy it, and for a while I considered selling. But when I met with the senior staff, I realized something. They weren't just employees. They were people James had mentored, people who'd built their careers with him. Selling to a stranger felt wrong. Instead, I worked with Robert to transition the business into an employee-owned structure. The people who'd worked alongside James for years would now own shares in what they'd built. I retained a controlling interest, but I hired a CEO and became chair of the board, present and engaged, but not pretending to be something I wasn't. And I started the foundation, the James and Dorothy Whitmore Fund for Adult Learning. We offered scholarships to people going back to school later in life, particularly those who'd put their education on hold to support families or who'd never had the chance when they were young. I ran it from a small office downtown and I loved every minute of it. 6 months after James died, I held the first scholarship ceremony. 20 recipients, all of them with stories about second chances and new beginnings. Michael came with me, and afterward he said, "Dad would have loved this." "He did love it," I said. "That's why we're doing it." That night, I went home to the house that felt less empty now, even though James was still gone. I made myself dinner, not the lasagna, but something new. I pressed a flower from the centerpiece at the scholarship ceremony and added it to the book with the dandelion. And I wrote in my journal, something I'd started doing after James died. Today we gave 20 people a chance to write a new story. James would have been proud. I'm proud too. This isn't the life I thought I'd be living at 67, alone and running a foundation and fighting my own battles. But it's my life, my story, and I'm not letting anyone erase it. I don't know what Kristina is doing now. I heard she moved to California, started over with a new job and a new last name. Part of me hopes she learned something from what happened. Part of me doesn't care. She's not part of my story anymore. Michael's doing better. He met someone new, a teacher named Sarah who makes him laugh and doesn't try to control him. He's learning to trust his own judgment again, to speak up when something feels wrong. He comes over for dinner every Sunday, and we don't talk about Kristina or the will or any of it. We talk about the present and the future. And sometimes, late at night when I can't sleep, I go to James's study and I read his letters again. The one from the folder, and the one from the flower press. I remember that I'm not just someone who happened to be there. I'm someone who built a life, who made choices, who mattered. And I remember that the best revenge against someone who tries to erase you isn't anger or bitterness. It's living so completely, so fully, that your story becomes impossible to ignore. That's what I'm doing now, writing myself back into my own life. Not with fury or drama, but with quiet determination and the knowledge that I deserve to take up space in this world. James knew that. And now, finally, so do I.